George Shultz's memoirs, it's startling how many phone calls and meetings he's having with the First Lady. When you read Henry Kissinger's memoirs, he's not having a lot of phone calls with Pat Nixon or Betty Ford.
Toward the end of his first term, Reagan softens his views toward the Soviets.
Ronnie thought, as did I, that there had to be a breakthrough. These two countries had to understand each other. I wanted to be sure that he really could accomplish this. Well, I didn't just sit back. You know, I was talking to people.
In September of 1984, Reagan invites Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko to the White House. It is a watershed moment in Soviet-U.S. relations.
This is a man who came and was there for a little glass of sherry before lunch and said to me, "Does your husband believe in peace?" And I said, "Of course." He said, "Well, then whisper it in his ear every night." I said, "I will. And I'll also whisper it in your ear."
Having lost the debate over Soviet policy, William Clark has left his position as National Security Advisor.
What Nancy Reagan had accomplished was extremely unusual. I can't think of other First Ladies being able to do the same thing. This is National Security Advisor. That's one of the most prominent positions in any administration.
She had one-on-one with the major power players in and outside the White House. She was a de facto chief of staff. And that meant that when she called people, people not only took the call, they listened.
Many of the White House staff learn it is best to be on the good side of Nancy Reagan.
There was almost a fear of her some ways. You know, I could sense it, smell it. I saw a lot of big, strong men melt in her presence when she got into one of her interrogations.
Nancy Reagan always said she wasn't interested in policy. She was only interested in the people who surrounded her husband.
What a lot of people, I don't think at the time, realized was people are also policy. The people that you have making decisions in the White House make them according to their own beliefs.
Nancy Reagan not only had a unique level of power, but used that power in unique ways. She didn't have to sit in a cabinet meeting to do it.
By the end of 4 years in office, the country's economy is on the upswing, and the seeds of Soviet negotiations are sown. Reagan runs for a second term and wins one of the largest electoral vote margins in history, carrying 49 states. In Reagan's second term, there are staff changes in the administration that leave the First Lady without her direct line to the West Wing. Nancy's longtime friend Mike Deaver departs to start a consulting firm. James Baker leaves his position as Chief of Staff, swapping jobs with Treasury Secretary Ronald Reagan.
The swap happened without their telling me anything about it. It just happened.
Ronald Reagan wanted to run things pretty exclusively himself. I don't think he understood Nancy's role at all. And that's really where some of the conflict between them starts.
He did not take care to make sure that he had one half of the team on his side, which was a fundamental mistake.
The Soviets also undergo a major shift in leaders when young reformer Mikhail Gorbachev comes into power. This is a further game changer for U.S.-Soviet relations. And in November 1985, the leaders meet in Switzerland.
I liked him, as did Ronnie, right from the beginning. From the moment those two met, you could see there was a real connection between them.
While the talks progress, an international crisis on another front threatens to derail Reagan's presidency. Islamic extremists hijack a jetliner, and Americans are taken hostage in Lebanon. Publicly, Reagan says he won't deal with terrorists, But secretly, he signs off on an arms shipment to Iran, and the hostages are released. When the news breaks, Reagan denies it's an arms for hostage deal.
The United States has not swapped boatloads of plane loads of American weapons for the return of American hostages, and we will not.
It then comes to light that money from the arms sale was transferred to Contra rebels fighting the communist regime in Nicaragua. The president denies prior knowledge of the deal, but without the approval of Congress, the transfer is a potentially impeachable offense.
Did you know about the Contra aid or not, sir?
Mr. President, hasn't this damaged your presidency?
Ronald Reagan looked bad, and they were sinking deeper and deeper, and Nancy Reagan was having a fit. She was concerned that the presidency was coming apart at the seams.
She became convinced that Don was not helping her husband look better, communicate well to the American people. His poll numbers were diving, people were losing confidence in him.
Happy birthday, dear Donald.
But the president does not want to lose Donald Reagan. The chief of staff had been successful at the Treasury Department. However, his management style doesn't work as well in the West Wing.
I don't know what you wish for, but it'll come true.
Many people in the administration would come to me or call me and say, "You've got to do something. This has got to change. This is not working. You've got to do something."
For months, Nancy Reagan brings in trusted allies to try to persuade the president that he must fire Don Reagan.
When that didn't work, she contacts people that she knows in the press, trying to kind of poison the well against Donald Reagan.
The First Lady's campaign to oust the Chief of Staff is soon front-page news.
President Reagan, did the president ask you to get off his back about Donald Reagan with the Post report?
Have you been fighting over this with the president, Mrs. Reagan?
No.
After the flap with Reagan surfaces, Nancy Reagan enlists others to convince the president to be more forthright about the Iran-Contra affair.
He understood the importance of communicating with the American people, but darn, he didn't want to admit that he made a mistake.
My father created a sort of narrative for himself and his own life, and he was pretty good at editing out bits of reality that didn't fit in the narrative, but occasionally, Iran-Contra being a perfect example, they couldn't be edited out.
The First Lady asked Special Counselor David Absher to persuade her husband to publicly admit his mistakes.
She knew if she pushed, he'd become stubborn, so she did think it was smarter to operate through some other people. She understood the psychology of her man. She understood his greatness. She understood all of his weaknesses.
My mother, I think, faster than he did, understood the stakes involved here and began to push him to come to grips with this, admit that you made a mistake, get out ahead of this thing, and if there are people that need to be thrown under the wheels of the bus, well, then so be it.
A commission set up to investigate the Iran-Contra matter issues a report in February of 1987. It concludes Reagan did not know about the diversion of funds, but is highly critical of his advisors. The next day, Donald Reagan resigns. Days later, the president addresses the nation.
A few months ago, I told the American people I did not trade arms for hostages. My heart and my best intentions still tell me that's true, but the facts and the evidence tell me it is not.
So with us downstairs and or upstairs in the alliance, he came around to doing it. And his poll numbers jumped instantly. I think Nancy Reagan rescued the Reagan presidency. To me, that's her great achievement. It's unprecedented. I mean, there are lots of first ladies who have really helped their husbands. I don't know of anybody who's helped them out of a crisis like that.
I think her role always was as his helpmate, his protector, his backstop. She always had his back.
Inside the White House, the Reagans' intense love for one another was always clear. Stu Spencer remembers once watching the Reagans say goodbye.
And they're hugging and they're kissing and you know, and it's going on and it's going on and it's going on. And I'm saying to myself, holy Toledo, what is this? You know what I mean? What it looked like, you know, somebody saying goodbye in Gone with the Wind.
He really didn't function very well for a couple of days if she wasn't around. Once she was there, everything was all right. He was a different person in many ways. He wanted her there every minute. And she was his confidant. They were the best friends.
In December 1987, Mikhail Gorbachev makes an historic trip to the United States to sign a nuclear arms reduction agreement.
This get-together between Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan might not ever have happened if it hadn't been for the work that Nancy Reagan had done behind the scenes to bring about change.
For Nancy Reagan to have this power, she had to deny it. Not just because the country would be uncomfortable with it, but because she didn't want to make her husband look weak. And Americans can't understand that the president needs to get advice from a lot of people. And if one of the major sources is their wife, it's like, it makes him an average guy.
On January 18, 1989, after 8 years in the White House, Nancy Reagan bids farewell to the White House staff.
We've been proud to call you our First Lady, or Nancy, or as that taxi driver in New York said, a real classy broad. But it's been
there were lots of things that I missed about the White House. The people, the butlers, the maids, you know, they became part of your life. And they were so wonderful during all these, I mean, the shooting, the illnesses, the deaths. They were just wonderful.
As the White House years draw to a close, the Reagans break ground for the Presidential Library. They retire to California, settling in the affluent Los Angeles neighborhood of Bel Air. But just 5 years out of the White House, Ronald Reagan writes a letter to the American people. In it, he reveals that he has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Nobody knew anything about Alzheimer's, including doctors. There was no support out there, in a sense. Nobody knew what to prepare me for. It was flying blind.
Nancy Reagan seldom ventures far from their Bel Air neighborhood as her husband's health declines.
Not many people saw him at that point. I didn't let them see him. I didn't want them to have that memory of him like that.